So the relationship between democracy and economic growth is one that has been central to many debates and an issue that many social scientists and philosophers have thought about. And sadly, we still don't have conclusive answers. One view, which is still very popular, was extremely popular about 20 years ago, which goes under the name of modernization theory, is essentially the view that you know a country just needs to grow and all good things are going to happen. You're going to get democracy, you're going to get human rights, you're going to get stability, you're going to have greater enlightenment. All of these are going to be just essentially more or less direct consequences of economic growth. And I think the experience of the past 50 years and especially the past 20 years shows that the modernization view is not right. Countries can grow and can go through certain fundamental structural transformations, and some of its kind of implications that was presumed to take place automatically under the modernization view will not take place. So growth doesn't seem to bring democracy automatically. Educational increases don't seem to bring democracy automatically. And in fact, this was most vividly demonstrated by what happened at the end of the Great Depression and the run up to the Second World War, and then after the war in countries like Argentina, which were both more educated, Germany and Argentina, for example, which were both more educated than other countries and had seen increases in their education in their recent past. So there is no easy recipe for democracy to emerge. So looked at it from that viewpoint, I think I don't see any necessity that the rapid process of economic growth that's taking place in China is going to bring democracy without any kind of major social conflict. Obviously, there are people now in China who are pushing for greater democracy, but we saw that in the Tiananmen Square being conclusively defeated, and another 20 years of essentially very little democracy in China. There will be another wave, and we'll see whether it will be defeated again. So far, it looks like the non-democratic forces in China are strong. The hold of the Communist Party on political power is strong. So I think there is no reason to say that in 5-6 years' time, democracy is going to arrive in China. I think there is a tendency to go in that direction, but it's coming not just from growth, but it's coming more from technology. It's the fact that in countries like China or Iran, people have access to the internet and to freer information than they had 20, 30 years ago, just when there was only print media that was more easily controlled by the government. That makes the kind of the horizons of the young people in those countries much broader and makes it much easier for them to articulate political demands. And I think that's a stronger force towards democracy than just the modernization hypothesis. That still leaves the question of what is the effect of democracy on economic growth. And obviously, the Chinese experience here again is very telling. It clearly shows that you can grow for a sustained period of time without democracy. So now I think it's you can say China has achieved over 30 years of steady growth without any modicum of democracy. And so does this establish that democracy is totally unnecessary or even detrimental to economic growth? I don't think so. I think the empirical evidence here is very mixed, very, very inconclusive. But that's because the empirical evidence that we can really kind of look at comes from post-war period, for which we have data both on economic growth and on democracy that can be easily quantified. But I think if you look at the longer the longer kind of term trends in history, I think one pattern that looks quite compelling to me is that non-democratic countries, oligarchic countries, or dictatorial countries can grow for fairly long periods, 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, even 50 years. But at the end of the day, the logic of non-democracy, which is at the political level, is also going to have knock-on implications on how the economy is organized. And in particular, those societies are not going to be as open to new blood coming in and taking away rents that have built up in the political or the economic sphere. So at some point, economic growth is going to start threatening either the political power of those who are monopolizing political power in a dictatorial or oligarchic system, or the economic rents of those firms and individuals that are really benefiting from the existing system. And at that point, the non-democratic systems are going to run into a crisis that will either has to be resolved by a big change in political system or stagnation. So we've seen this in many instances before. We've seen it in the Dutch Republic, we've seen it in Venice, we've seen it in, perhaps that's an interpretation of what happened in the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, which will be much more familiar to the Italians than U.S. Audiences. But I think some process like that, I think, is the most plausible explanation of the patterns that we're seeing. So therefore, I think in the short run, there is no necessity that non-democratic countries should be unable to grow. But in the long run, in the medium to long run, 30, 40 years, non-democratic countries are going to start heading towards a path of sclerosis unless they also start making fundamental changes in their political system. I think the $60 million question here is exactly why is it that countries end up with bad institutions. If you can make a convincing empirical case that institutional differences lead to growth differences, then growth over the course of 20, 30, 40 years is going to lead to big differences in levels. And essentially that's the kind of the most straightforward explanation for the huge differences that we observe today. Some countries have been able to take advantage of the economic opportunities and grow at rates like 2% a year. Other countries have not growth, essentially they've stagnated, and over the course of about 50, 60, 100 years, that has led to a big gulf between these countries. But if that's the case, why did some countries choose bad institutions in the first place? I think one explanation you can say is that we're all kind of shooting in the dark. We don't know which institutions work. Some of them gambled in socialism, some of them gambled on capitalism, and those who gambled on capitalism turned out to be right ex post. And I think there might be some truth to that, but I think the bigger part of the answer to why institutions differ across countries is that growth is not a uniform process that benefits everybody. Every kind of technological change, every kind of economic activity creates winners and losers. There are some individuals and some firms that are going to benefit from the growth process. There are some others that are going to lose out. This is the same is true in the political spheres. If you open up the political system and encourage political competition, which is then going to trickle down into economic institutions and generate more economic activity, well, that means that political power of some absolutist monarch or some dictator is going to disappear. So both in the economic sphere and in the political sphere, economic growth or the institutions that are going to bring economic growth are going to destroy the rents of certain powerful constituencies, and therefore they're going to create tensions. At the end, simplifying it a little bit, therefore, you can say that countries that end up with good institutions are those that somehow manage to co-opt those with political power so that they become part of the growth process, or they can overwhelm them with force so that they do not become a barrier. On the other hand, societies that end up with bad institutions or unable to shake out the bad institutions are those that are unable to kind of do either of these two things. So at the end, they remain beholden to the interest groups and politicians and individuals or firms that really want the status quo ante to persist, even though that status quo ante doesn't bring economic growth. So at the end of the day, simplifying it a little bit, institutional differences are intimately linked to social conflict, because there's going to be conflict about how the gains from growth are going to be divided, and there's going to be conflict about whether the growth process should actually go underway together with all of its distributional consequences. And how that conflict is resolved is going to determine which type of institutions a society is going to have at the end.